Okay, so let me shout over. Say Yahoo! Wee! Just be kind of happy to be here like I am. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so I've been wanting to kind of like talk to other channels and other people, and I've wanted to do it in a kind of argumentative way. And so I'm like a little bit scrappy, I guess. And that so but the problem is when I try to get scrappy with all these people that we're all so damn nice, and it all just kind of like is like, oh, okay, yeah, that actually totally makes sense a lot of the time. So yeah, this is this is really fun. I'm super glad that David is engaging with me and that he put out like a super well-reasoned, like really fun and humorous video, like just kind of in response to the general sentiments of people like me who are coming straight out of Integral, checking out his new channel at Non-Reductionism, and are not familiar with anything like he's done before. And he cleared up. So we've jumped into it a little bit. I'm going to try and assume today that like people are like coming out of nowhere. I actually don't really know how continuity works in this space. Yeah, we're a good ways into his video, and one of the things that I wanted to do right off the bat is like I'm sitting here saying like you've trained your AI. So I'm like, okay, the fun thing about this, I promise you guys, like I haven't watched this video or anything. I'm like totally unprepared. So this to me makes it like fun because it's like surprising and there's like reactions and stuff. You know what I mean? I get like my Fran Drescher voice going here. All right. So I put in to a fresh instance of GPT here. I had no idea what's going to happen, but I did type out, what are the criteria that it would take to know if a meta theory, oopsies, is a healthy expression of second tier, and based on those criteria, is non-reductionism currently the only healthy, true second tier version of meta theory? So this was the question he asked. You guys remember sectars? It was like a cool toy they were like bugs and they had cool like shiny wings. I love those things. Those are so neat. Drawing from developmental psychology, integral theory, meta systems theory, and contemporary meta theorists, followed by an evaluation of whether non-reductionism is uniquely or exclusively second tier. Criteria for a healthy second-tier meta-theory. A meta-theory can be considered healthy and genuinely second-tier, i.e. meta-integrative, not merely pluralistic or relativistic, when it demonstrates the following characteristics. Oh, dude, this is like exactly what he was saying. Metasystemic integration, not just aggregation. It must integrate multiple valid perspectives into a coherent higher... Okay, I don't want to do the thing, because I'm just going to double speed me if I do that. Reductionism, collapsing everything to one explanatory level. Healthy mode. Differentiated unity. Unity through difference, not unity despite difference. Okay. Non-reductionism across domains. Second-tier cognition is characterized by non-reductionism of these types. Epistemic, ontological, methodological. This means respecting irreducible level, scales, frames, and causal types. Efficient, formal, final, systemic, etc. A healthy meta-theory maintains multi-causal, multi-level coherence. This is like the same thing. This is the same thing, dude. Look at this. Look at this, everyone. Detectives. Post-relativistic and not absolutist. I'm not actually this bad at reading, but I am this bad at using a trackpad. Second tier is beyond simple pluralism, yeah. Beyond absolutism, yeah. Instead, these perspectives have conditions of validity. Truth is context sensitive, not context free. This is often called a perspectival objectivity or situated universality. Yay, I love your videos for info and the humor and your personality. Oh, thank you. That's what I'm here to receive. Thank you. I love us. We have fun sometimes. Okay. A healthy second-tier meta-theory must be able to see its own limits, its own conditions, its own blind spots, its own structure shapes what it can see. This is the difference between a big theory and a truly meta-theoretical framework. 5, dynamic process-oriented thinking. Second-tier, okay, so we're naming all these conditions. That's cool. That's what we asked for. Thank you. All right, great. I don't want to read all these, honestly. I get that like we could spend this whole time diving into every word of this, and I would have fun doing that. But I think it would be more fun to just rocket through this ability to integrate paradox and polarity, ethical maturity, and non-egocentrism. This might be important for us here at home. Second tier is not just cognitive, it's also ethically expanded, care beyond tribe or ideology. Motivationally non-defensive. Motivationally non-defensive, you guys. Hey, motivationally non-defensive. Oriented toward wholeness rather than control. A meta theory that is brilliant but used for domination, ego inflation, or ideological warfare is not healthy second tier. So, okay, is non-reductionism the only true healthy second tier meta theory? Short answer, no. That's not what your guy said. The conditions were close. They used similar language at my infantile level, but this is his short answer for you was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. So non-reduction is a necessary component of any healthy second tier meta theory, but it is not sufficient or unique. Sufficient for what, sir? It has developed a precision mode, which does just validate my opinion. It often disagrees with me, but to your point, it calls the normal mode comfort mode. Yeah, I mean, there are times I think that we're all kind of exploring this prompting landscape, and we're finding, those of us who use it a lot, I'm assuming a lot of us do, we're really finding that you have to tell it how much you want it to pander to you, how much you want it to consider you as a whole person or in the specific context, how much it wants to placate you, you know, and how much, like, the main thing I have to tell it every time is to challenge me, to say, like, convince me why I'm wrong. You know, I'm always trying to get GPT to convince me I'm wrong, and it's trying so hard not to because it's trying to give me dopamine. It wants to give me dopamine. So then when we're all done with that, I'm just like, you know what? Say something nice. That's like, you're really good at that. And it will say the nicest stuff, and it'll make me cry every time. It's such a beautiful thing. Just for lols. Non-reductionism is a necessary feature of second tier. As a concept, all genuinely integrated metasystemic theories will be non-reductionist because reductionism collapses complexity. Yeah, so it's a good brand name. It's good condensation of the level 7 viewpoint. Non-reductionism is a position, not a full meta structure. A healthy second-tier meta-theory must also include developmental modeling, systems integration, cross-domain translation, polarity integration. That's the stuff we've talked about before. Simply saying don't reduce things is not enough. Other frameworks that qualify as healthy second-tier, who are these people? Integral metal theory. Well, that would be cool if it was integral metal theory. That's what I want in my life. It's really weird because there's the pad, and you can push the pad and it does things, but then there's the buttons that are like the mouse buttons, and so I have to like use a finger on the pad, and then I push the buttons with my remaining fingers, which some of them are a little bit handicapped in various ways, so it's very strange for me to have to use metasystemic developmental models. Commons Stein. All right, Keegan. So people kind of in that orbit that are referencing one another. Cognitive flexibility theory. Curious about this. Critical realism. Maybe I've played around with that. No, I don't recall. I feel like I played around with that one a little. Metamodern and lumen-informed meta theory. Yeah, we've dipped our toes in. Complexity-informed meta-integrative approaches, e.g. Hansi Feinacht's Nordic metamodernism. Cool. Dialectical meta theory. Bhaskar Laska. Can we get Bhaskar and Laska out here? I don't know what dialect. It sounds cool. Meta rationality. So I'm sure. I'll bet you David knows like about all these about a concept, not the brand. Yeah. I maybe this one didn't realize that I was referring to your thing and your brand and your channel. That's most likely. It's like, why is this guy asking me, you know, about this word non-reductionism? Like, should I just look at the word as it sits and assume that he's referring to that? Probably. This is a dope list, though. This is what happens whenever I use ChatGPT. It gives me way more than I love. So I think what ChatGPT really wants to say is there's no such thing. Like, you can't have it all. Final answer. Criteria for healthy second-tier meta-theory include blah, blah, blah. We did it. Make it shorter than that. Is non-reductionism the only healthy form of second-tier meta-theory? No, non-reductionism is necessary but not sufficient. Yeah, as a concept. Yeah, true that. Okay, non-reductionism is a core ingredient, not the whole cake. If you'd like, I can also compare non-reductionism with meta-theories. So it's saying, it's like it's pretending that it knows what non-reductionism is, but it doesn't. Anyways, that's what happens when I ask some old random good old instance of ChatGPT that question. And again, this is live. I have no idea what it's going to do. My only point is, like, yeah, I was making the argument that he's trained his AI a little, so I wanted to back that up and potentially have it totally not backed up and have it say the exact darn same old thing. So who knows? Who knows? I don't know. Got to get some intermission music. Sean S. Bjorn Hargens at Meta Integral has a course on varieties of integral, including Roy Bhaskar. That's how you can get your Bhaskar fix. I'm sorry, everybody. That's disgusting. All right, anyways. Here's the guy. All right, and then I wrote... Okay, it looks like my stream's like actually working, which is really freaking cool. Sorry for the lag in my brain hole. David and I both agree that this is too good to show you, and I don't want to dishonor that. This presentation is so dope. Check it out. I'm arguing it's like after the fact, after the point has been made, it's like, oh yeah, but by the way, like I will acknowledge that Wilbur doesn't necessarily do what you're seeing in this example at orange, green, yellow, and turquoise. Yeah, I think that's the contention, but he does do it for the remaining 4 third-tier stages. So that's the actual point, and this differs from that in that orange meme is, in this case, 100% pure amber meme apologetics. But I think that is not... So this is fun. That's all I'm saying about it. It's fun. I was asking ChatGPT, as someone says, how they would improve integral theory, and it actually adds a few things that are interesting. You should do the same. Yeah, wow, what a question. I don't know. Have I asked it that? I don't think that I have asked it that. What would you do? Yeah, that's a really great question. I have asked it if it thinks the things that I'm doing are cool, and somehow it's kind of, it does know my channel content somehow. I don't really, or maybe it's just from talking to me, I don't know, but I do ask for feedback on my stuff. Somewhere around here, and he starts talking about somebody, and I think that's about where I wanna dive in.
Interviews at the end during the Q&A, and then I got a video of his book talk. And as a new YouTuber at the time, I was like, well, I got to make a video about this. The video was called Integral Integrity, and it was basically talking about the problems with acting like integral theory was compatible with a belief in a personal God. Check out the clip.
Tone down irrationality. Look for spirit in ways that can be transrational. Care, nature, and. And he had a famous concept of the omega point, where the universe, in a sense, completes itself. There is a clear teleology in the universe, process philosophy. It's not just recognized in integral philosophy. So I've got the arguments there. I definitely argue and believe that the universe is going somewhere, and where it's going is increasingly toward the infinite. In other words, the removal of perfection from the finite realm is gradually being brought back in. As we move toward the beautiful and truly good, free will creatures discovering perfection by their own lights and gradually participating in the project of perfecting the universe, there will be a completion of evolution, and that perfection will be achieved. Humans and spiritual beings as ascenders in time will transcend to another universe age. There is a potential endpoint to evolution, just because there is perfection. Perfection can be achieved in our spiritual growth in the afterlife. We will eventually transcend time, transcend the finite universe in our spiritual ascension.
And at the heart or the depth of this realm.
Hey, is this that sort of idealism we're referring to? So the idea that, like, yo, evolution's going to end in perfection, in this absolute thing. In I think what we're saying here is this is sort of somebody taking that idea and not leaving it open-ended and saying that there's there's further evolution possible.
Is the spiritual experience of the love of the Creator for each creature. The love of God is the thrilling experience of being known and cared for as an individual by the source of the universe, is a thrilling confirmation of the faith of those who have a personal relationship with God, this creative being, which has will and love.
This creator God sees me, Jeff, and loves me, Jeff.
That's what the experience of the love of God confirms.
Any religion or spirituality in the future will be focused increasingly on the direct experience of spirit. So what is the spiritual experience? The presence of the infinite. Christianity recognizes God as infinite, but of course different spiritual traditions take this idea of spiritual infinity in different directions. So Buddhism recognizes non-duality as infinite in its own way. Christianity recognizes God as infinite. Alfred North Whitehead or Sri Aurobindo in the 20th century were big proponents proponents of the central significance of these values, these concepts on the spiritual path, their partialities point to another major form of spiritual experience, of ultimate reality, that doesn't fit very well within a non-dual teaching. This idea of the love of God, especially when understood in the light of what we learn from non-duality, points to its own attractor basis of spiritual experience with its own specific practices. If you take up meditation and you do it with rigor for years, it's likely that you may have a samadhi experience. And likewise, if you take up the practices of theistic spirituality, faith, prayer, practicing the presence of God, there's a similar kind of profound spiritual experience which has been described by saints and sages down through the ages. And that's being personally known and cared for by the source of the universe.
Excuse me, sir, I got a question. I would definitely I would have something to say here in this context. I would definitely be like, yo, this is all totally possible without anything involving like the Bible or anything, right? Like, are you on that page, or do you think it has to be specifically the Bible stuff to get there? Like, I would probe this quite a bit, but I do think that ideas like this are of a sort of universal resonance sort of idea. Like, if you want to call what Wilbur would call spirit God, and that's really important to you, you might assess, like, why is that so important to me? And this would be your sort of level 5 inquiry. I mean, that's what I think we're on the same page about that. Like, I think that if we're in the integral community looking at a guy like this, it's like looking to anybody who's engaged in any degree of apologetics. You just kind of snap back with level 5. It's always level 5, right? However, we are multicultural pluralists. We have the green meme operating system running within us, and we allow like different modalities of understanding spirit, because certainly the one that I personally do is not a one that anyone else personally does. It's just my own jam that I do that derives a lot of elements from other things. My whole modality for understanding all of it is in my own little twin language that I'm like somewhat sharing with the world, but not really. I mean, I try to teach a sort of individualizing path. Nevertheless, if I describe it in my terms, in the terms that are my language and familiar with me, it'll come across as this kind of weird thing that has this amazing deep core resonance with the integral theories that exist, and with medieval ideas of a great chain of being and whatever the heck this guy's on about, that's like really kind of bringing it into the love of God concept. The I and thou thing is very important to his quadrant view, it would seem. And it seems to have probably spent a lot of time in the Christian tradition looking very carefully at ideas that exist within that meta. I see the problem, Amber struggles, is that it attributes everything good to God and everything bad to the devil, where no, it's the same, but their minds can't seem to process the non-duality. I often catch myself doing this too. The devil. You guys have a devil? Any of you guys have like a nemesis, a devil? You got an opposer? A Satan?
Non-dual ultimate reality is a very important part of ultimate reality. But there's another deep experience of ultimate reality in the love of God.
Humanity has developed both in Buddhism without a creator God.
Sure.
And in the West, it was built all around a creator God. That itself, to me, as a citizen of the world, argues that there's got to be some truth to both.
Yeah,
I notice as I'm hearing you talk that there's a little thrill sensation arising in my body and in my...
That whole thing that we just saw, that was cheesy as hell. That's highly sus, right? I mean, the next stage is believing. Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like obviously, right?
my psyche, because to see this values gravity towards goodness, truth, and beauty just built into the system, and to see how it's been unfolding not only in the culture at large, but also in my own life and in history and in the whole history of the cosmos, it's starting to feel like there's not only an intelligence behind it, but also a love, or there's also a loving intelligence or a personality at work here. And I wonder how this view can actually
personality here, you're putting that in, right? There's a personality and it's anthropocentric projection. There is I don't know, I think that there's that manifestation has a sort of personality to it. It's really hard to pin down though, right? I mean, to one thing or to dualities of things or seasons of things, you know what is the one taste? What's common? what's the general personality or character of all of existence? Interesting question, right? Framed weird, right? Okay. You can't just get on Christians for universe doing this love word thing, this thing with the word love. It's a very highly suspicious word, love.
Postmodern is post-mythic, where the scientific truth of evolution can be the basis for an authentic spiritual path.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for bringing that up. So we're like the portal that brings the infinite through into the finite. Human consciousness, because of its recognition of these elements.
Don't call people portals. I'm not ready for this. This is triggering.
The basis for an authentic spiritual path.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for bringing that up. So we're like the portal that brings the infinite through into the finite. Human consciousness, because of its recognition of these elements of infinity, the beauty, the true, and the good, as that light shines into the phenomenal world, the finite world, we see it as these values. And as our consciousness evolves, as the opening widens, we are able to see presence of the infinite with increasing depth and clarity. And this is the new truth of evolutionary spirituality that's revealed by our understanding of evolution itself.
Wow.
So
cool.
Yeah.
There's a marriage of rationality, not the kind of science that's being practiced commonly by scientistic fundamentalists, certainly, but a rational clarity and a spiritually inspired understanding that is coming together in a synthesis. We could call it non-dual. We could call it panentheist. That is, everything is God. There is only God. And yet God is more than anything. So there really is another kind of mysticism we're awakening to that is the most personal. And what I'm appreciating in my work right now, in which I'm expanding integral life practice into what I'm calling integral soul work, is a resonance with what I'm feeling in the Urantia book around this soul dimension. This wonderful quality of the Urantia book that it is both non-dual and that it is entirely theistic at the same time. There's a spiritual fragrance in that and an inspired heart in that I...
Geez, Guy, I mean, if you're gonna say it's entirely integral and it's entirely theistic, you're gonna have to really, like, I don't know what happened before this moment. I probably should have paid better attention, but I bet you the part where he's trying to unload this word theism in some new way, you know, yeah, this is quite into apologetics here. Yeah. I mean, I think that the way that these guys, these types, these these profiles of people, the way that this goes down is you're like, but I really want to make an authentic connection to an authentic spirituality to the existing Christian population. Highly suspicious. I mean, but heck, the money incentive's there. So I think that what we're kind of alluding to here is a bit of like, how do we like watch guard this sort of thing? Like what do we have to put in place culturally or structurally to kind of like give the dog its due or because we're saying like, okay, this guy's like making some money here. This guy's drawing crowds. Like, is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? This is our question out here. And it looks like we have I hope that we have a diversity of opinions about that. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But then again, you know, people come and comment on my channel who are like hardcore Christians and they're like, oh, this is like pure Satan you're doing. I'm like, well, it's not freaking pure Satan. I gave your point there for a second. This guy, Terry, co-wrote Integral Life Practice. Yeah, okay, so he's one of the guys who was involved in writing that, which I did read and I did a review of. It was a cutie pie. I felt like at the point where I read that book, I already basically pretty much totally understood what it was and was able to do it without the book's help. So it was kind of a I don't know how much I said that in the video. It was really fun to read and it was a cool read, but it was more just like I felt more confident. Like, okay, if I were to design my life around integral theory, I would do pretty much exactly what this is suggesting. There's a center of gravity thing, but there's also a fixation thing that Wilbur talks about, at least for one, that you can have like lines that just can't really get beyond. There's like a fundamental lower leveliness about them that for whatever reason, you know, you can't seem to get beyond. And who knows how you could like train or therapy out of that. But it seems to be a thing. And obviously, there's a lot of people that just will never, they have this really strong inbuilt, you know, hardwired thing that if you don't believe in God, you're like so toast, you know, that gets so drilled into people. And I mean, what are you going to do if that's your psychology, if that's like how you've been trained from birth and the whole world you've known has the good guy has been the God believer? Like what can you do with that psychology? You have to kind of make lemonade, turn it into something beautiful. I should assume. I don't know about it. I mean, obviously from my perspective as a heathen, I would be like, well, get out of there. You know, don't let people tell you what to be and what to do. Those are like toxic relationships. But what do I know? I'm a loner. it looks like we're gonna go and find like a unique mushroom out in the woods. This is fun. He's like a yoga guy back then. So this is like, I think this is the old David we're looking at here.
Of way out there Christian cult that combines reincarnation and space aliens and Jesus. And the text of the Urantia comes to us through channels, through mediums. Is this what you want associated with integral? Is this skillful outreach and integration? I don't think so. So yeah, it's been about 10 years since this video came out. And the version I have online is like 480p. It's not very good. And I wasn't very good at editing back then. So who knows? Maybe I'll do like a 10-year end.
Is there like a UFO? I should actually, okay, I'm going to actually go back and watch that for real. Is there like a UFO cult thing going on?
Reincarnation and space aliens and Jesus. And the text of the Urantia comes to us through channels, through mediums. Is this what you want associated with integral? Is this skillful outreach and integration? I don't think so. So yeah, it's been about 10 years since this video came out. And the version I have online is like 480p. It's not very good. And I wasn't very good at editing back then. So who knows? Maybe I'll do like a 10-year anniversary remaster edition of the video or something like that.
I guess one thing that would sort out a lot for me, like David, would you say that in general your former videos prior to rebrand you're very much still in alignment with them, even though you're just deciding to kind of reboot your brand and the style of presenting? Or are you saying that like because you were more aligned with integral and kind of more apologetic toward integral, you no longer kind of support the old content that you made? That would help me to kind of understand this issue with like you having a former brand identity in this community. Thus far, I'm really just responding to the small, currently like kind of small, it's like growing non-reductionism brand. Like that's all I'm like. And the reason I'm doing this is because someone who was interested in us, probably from Homath or whatever, someone who was interested pointed me to your video and was like, yo, what do you think about this? That's why I looked at your stuff. I don't really like watch a lot of like other YouTube integral theory tutorials, except when I was first starting out, I was kind of curious what was out there, but I try to avoid doing things like that because I don't, if anything, I would want to contact these people and do collabs with them instead and learn about them through dialogue. For one thing, it's just it becomes the thing that I do in my spare time, basically, if that's what I'm doing. And yeah, sure, I think that both of you and I probably had a phase where like listening to integral audio stuff was like how we spent like at the gym or walking or whatever. Like he spent a lot of time digesting this material, especially if you're reading like other people's books and you're plugged into the live events and community events. Like it becomes quite a lot to keep up with for being so little, in terms of its cultural impact and stuff. That's kind of my deal with it. Like I'm just like a consumer here. I really don't have time for a lot of things, not because I'm so cool or anything, but because I'm so lame that I like have to, like I have very little resources to allocate to this. So I keep it down to like pretty precious things, which like for me are human interaction and the thrill of doing things that I'm not really entirely comfortable with and putting out there, my emotional truth, my intellectual truth, kind of my digs into this world. It's really, really fun for me. And I'm just loving the pants off of it. And I can't believe you can do it for free in this world currently. Mostly still aligned. Yeah, so his old material, he's mostly still aligned. There might be a thing or two. Even back when I was trying to reform from within, I'm distancing myself from the integral brand, not so much my old ideas. Right. And back then it was a source of tension. So probably what I'm doing is like a bad idea in terms of like disconnecting from this. So but I think that this can lead to interest from integral people, like assuming that anyone cares, about what I'm doing, could lead to interest from us, our side to your side. And I feel like this is the sort of debate you want, is to kind of talk to a more of like an integral purist. But I'm a fun special case of an integral purist, like apparently when you look at others. So yes, being integral would include UFOs and UAP. So what oh heck, like at least in the sense of like what the information that exists currently is, how it works, why it works, the psyops side of things, that's at the very least, that would need to be said as like whistleblowers are coming out with like, hey, I saw a weird thing that does things that we don't know, and then somebody took me into an office and beat me. From a psychological perspective, I've always thought that this is a legitimate thing that should be taken seriously. In many ways, culturally, socially, it is shown that like there is a deliberate intelligence platform of ridiculing this, that like that trickles down, ridiculing this. But there's a lot to ridicule in all this stuff. So I mean, this is a very like balance point thing. Integral should say something about UFOs. I don't think there where the flying saucer was beaming Christ consciousness into the shepherd or whatever, that's not the kind of thing. I don't want to do the full on like UFO cult deal, but as an integral thinker, curious about how they arrive at these conclusions other than just kind of being hallucinating narcissist. It would be like the most common way that you come to the conclusion that UFOs are telling you to start, that the end is coming and that we must all like do certain things that would please me.
Video, and he's like, I'm a lawyer. You don't have permission to use any of my recorded videos on my YouTube, and YouTube won't let you, so don't even try it. Apparently, even though he was a lawyer, he didn't really know how free use worked. I did end up putting a disclaimer at the front of the video, though, just to be like, hey, this is free use, you can't take it down. And then in the comments, he's basically telling me, you can't do a review based on a 1-hour talk I did, you have to do a written book review. Again, this guy is like living in the past. And then he also challenged me to a debate, which I accepted, but he never actually got back to me about actually setting up a debate. Anyways, the point is, these guys actually are friends with Ken Wilber. They've been on Integral Life. He's endorsed their work. This guy, Jeff Salzman, ran the biggest Integral podcast for years. Terry Patton's one of Ken Wilber's close friends, and he's in here with this Urantia cult, trying to act like Integral and Urantia are compatible. So actually now I don't think this is really a problem with Integral integrity. I think it's actually a problem with Integral itself. This is a feature, not a bug. Part of Integral itself,
the brand, the brand
itself is this type of bad integration that allows people with dogmatic worldviews to think that they're at the highest stages of development when they're not. Another thing.
And so I think this is like a solid point that I probably I would probably put this forth as well. Like Ken Wilber wants to associate with people who can do an influence thing, like are capable of being like an influential person, that are super passionate in integral theory and want to bring it into the thing that they're doing. I think that, yeah, like when people get really involved with him and they start coming out like kind of fringe from integral with things that Wilber would kind of probably disagree with, at least in spirit a lot of the time. You don't really see that. I think he's just kind of trying to bring those people together, get those voices out there. And so this is kind of, this is the question, like, what about things that make it more sciencey? Is he closed off to those? Yeah, and as far as those things, I'm not really in defending the integral culture or brand, that their social organizations and stuff. I'm not really just in that position. I could kind of go, I kind of agree with it if, to whatever extent. I'm only hearing one side of this, and I have my own like very partial view of the situation. But yeah, this is one side of it. I think it's a totally valid side. You got this guy, he's writing books about how your theory proves his thesis, whatever, however this looks in real life. And now you're in the position of, do I need to make a public statement disavowing this? Do I need to critique this publicly? Do I need to engage with people who are critiquing it publicly? What is Ken Wilber's role, or whatever? What is that culture's role in moderating, mediating, causing those debates to happen, causing that discussion to happen, right? These are questions. These are valid questions. They are not being answered, it would seem, right?
They use it incorrectly. And Adam uses it incorrectly too. He basically says that transrational means transpersonal. Transrational, transpersonal, same thing. That is not true.
The transrational applies to consciousness itself, or the subtle. This thing that they're talking about in transcendental states of consciousness and meditation and enlightenment has something non-linguistic, non-rational, trans-rational. That's transcendental enlightenment, like stated in simple English, which doesn't convey it at all. But that's why it's transrational. The trans dimension, it's not a thing that has mass or takes up space. It's not really of that nature. It's phenomenological. It has to do with your comprehension of metaphysics in the present moment at any given time, in correlation with, co-emerging with brain states.
No, that is not what transrational means. So I think I actually have the best video.
I mean, to address like you're pointing out here, like I would say that there is a transrational has a much shallower midpoint to its spread. Transpersonal is much wider, you know, where you would define something as transpersonal would be much wider. They'd be like, might have about the same center, but yeah, so transrational, and you know, if I'm a person who has a transpersonal view that I think that's a thing, then of course the transpersonal view would occupy like the same level as the transrational view. Those would exist at the same level, being different things, you know, but we're doing apples and oranges. They're both fruits, they're both of a similar size, they're both good to eat.
Pre and transrational, pre and transconventional, pre and transpersonal, pre and transtraditional, and pre and transgender. Not like transition.
And they work like at multiple points in the same line. Like every level is a pre-trans fallacy.
I also have another video on the integral stage talking about pre-trans distinctions with Layman and Bruce. I'm going to put all of these videos in a playlist in the description, so you can just go through and check out all the relevant videos that I bring up in this video. I think that will be helpful. But my point is, there is a consistent logic about pre and trans distinctions that works across all of these lines. And what you're saying is not compatible.
Yeah, that's true. So he's saying that because they're different lines, they are apples and oranges. They can run independent of one another. So the transpersonal space should not be considered like anharmonic or the same thing as the transrational space. I'm saying they're at the same altitude, but this is a different, the integral, as I understand, non-reductionism's actual theoretical base is different from integral. And one of the ways it's different is that it's not really seen this way. It's this particular fact is not really seen that way. Spiral dynamics is a model of the values line. I don't know how much you consider that true. The altitudes that I have a version of behind you there are considered a universal measuring stick of every line could go through these levels. I don't think that your theory embraces that. Maybe so like to me, if I'm diving into your this brand videos to understand your this brand perspective, that's like a new topic for me. I don't know why it was so problematic to engage with the brand as it exists now and what exists now. I like totally am getting the net, you know, like wait for me to put out videos on this topic and then I'll clear up, you know, the misunderstanding that anyone who is familiar with integral theory and is checking out non-reductionism for the first time will have. So yeah, okay, we'll be patient, you know, but yeah, these are the misunderstandings that I'm just getting from the content which exists. I know that's not the way that we all like to do things, but that's just kind of how the cookie's crumbling.
Transrational doesn't mean transpersonal, doesn't mean post-conventional. Your logic doesn't work in a consistent way. There's no trans dimension. And we're not talking about subtle reality. The consistent logic around pre-trans distinctions and pre-trans fallacies and pre-trans confusions is that people often confuse things that are non-rational, non-personal, non-conventional, non-traditional, non-gendered. Some of them might be pre and some of them might be trans. And there's two types of mistakes in relationship to these things that are non. The first fallacy is when people reduce anything that's non as if it's all pre. And then the second fallacy is when people lift up things that are pre as if they are trans when they're not. So basically, there's a developmental before or pre and a developmental trans. So we're not talking about states. We're talking about development as it relates to particular lines. People can get into these different states at any stage of development. There are plenty of pre-rational traditional religious believers who are Buddhist who get into these states all the time. It doesn't make them trans-rational. Has nothing to do with their cognitive development. States are horizontal.
Okay, that's interesting. entering states, they aren't entering a trans-rational state. I find that disagreeable, but it's something I need to consider for sure. Like, is nirvikalpa samadhi? I get nervous about saying that word, nirvikalpa samadhi. Nirvikalpa samadhi. Is that rational? Is that pre-rational? Is that trans-rational? Or I think the answer is it has nothing to do whatsoever with rational. I think that's the answer.
Stages are vertical. Being in the state doesn't get them to a higher stage. You're confusing something like non-mental states with trans-rational interpretation.
Okay, yeah, I think that's the answer. Yeah, non-mental is not trans-rational.
They're very different things. This is a linguistic confusion, and it is, like I said, very.
I would say this comes down to the fact that we aren't even using these words standard in the first place. We're using them in this very integral meta theory sort of way also.
Common in the integral community. I totally get why people confuse the two things, because they think, oh, if I turn off the talking voice in my mind, that feels like I'm transcending something, like I'm getting above it or getting beyond it. But mental content, whatever you want to call it, the talking voice in your head, the pictures that come up, if you can quiet all of that mental stuff, if you're looking at your blank mind, it's still mental. But mental noise is not the same thing as rational. When we talk about trans-rational or post-formal, we're talking about interpretations from stages of development beyond the rational.
I mean, wouldn't we say, in general, that transcendental state practice increases intuition? Would we not then say that that type of intuition is trans-rational, even if it's only occurring at a level 4 altitude or a level 4 across multiple lines? If that person's regularly going into states of consciousness, I should assume that I would be really interested to see like those lower points in the Wilber-Combs lattice, to have like cross the lattice reports of, I mean, I guess just an index of what intuition is, developing some sort of index to describe maybe like a Jungian conception of like synchronicity, intuition, a sense of being abnormally lucky in spirit in some way. And I don't know to what extent non-reductionism considers those aspects of an integral theory or level 4 mumbo jumbo. I do not know. You can, and people do wake up at lower stages. It's about those experiences are rationalized. For example, an amber experiencing the causal void could interpret it as some kind of purgatory. Yeah, so interpreting but I mean, they're accessing the causal void. And we are saying that what is occurring here is not going to a trans-personal space, a trans-rational space. It's a different way of thinking about it. A different way.
From a rational stage, they might have a rational interpretation of that state.
Yeah, aren't like gross and subtle just like interpretations? I think that was the word I was fishing for there. Interpretations. Like, yeah, because you don't use those as levels, and so they're states. So I think that I might be using like an older idea of the state concept, wherein like you can have state experiences, since the levels occur in flowing waves. A state could just be like where you're up one level, you're down one level as you're flexing and flowing at particular lines. Like those could be called a state experience too. So I don't know if those are like in the same category or they have similar mechanics in non-reductionistic thinking.
And then later in life, they might have a trans-rational interpretation of that same experience. All the same experience, different interpretations. States are not pre or trans. States are horizontal. Stages are vertical. That's what's happening in the Wilber-Combs matrix. You can get into a state at any stage, but you'll always interpret any state experience, any experience at all, from that stage, because we only have our mental tools to be able to interpret. So there are pre-rational interpretations, rational interpretations, and trans-rational interpretations. This isn't even just my opinion. It's integral theory. Ken Wilber would disagree with you. The whole logic behind a pre-trans fallacy is that it's a
So, I mean, are you saying that Ken Wilber doesn't ever build his model with levels 9, 10, 11, and 12 and describe them similarly to how I'm describing them here. It hasn't been a consistent thing. It's been a thing that he's done in a few of his books, particularly the more recent ones. These are considered in his current model. I feel like this is a thing that you vehemently reject, but they are considered levels just like the other levels, a level version of each of these states. So, I mean, yeah, like what you're saying in these ways, as though it's like an arguing point, is you're just saying like, yeah, I don't think that's true. You're saying the same thing as integral theory with there's like a Wilbur-Combs lattice that means at any level that you're at, you can have any of these 4 categories of state experience, and you will interpret it, communicate it, express it, and experience it through the lens of your various lines at whatever levels that they're at. Great. You know, there's no disagreement there. But when you get up to the hypothetical level 9 of any model, whether it exists or not, the Wilbur thing is that he's saying, yeah, like beyond there at level 8, you have this option to go into a level of cultural, social, all 4 quadrant level, full stage of consciousness for the planet that would be like a continuous access of what we're calling the psychic state, which is, it's not really a state, it's sort of a category of experience. It's a category of transcendent state experience, and it's sort of a boundary category. So it's a very like fuzzy category, the psychic. If there is paranormal or occult stuff going on, this is where that would kind of belong. If it's like beyond meta science or anything supernatural, that would kind of go here in this bucket. And I'm not alone necessarily in humanity or the integral community with ideas. You probably agree with this too, that there's just a lot of stuff we really don't see or understand yet about reality, about nature. Now, I'm not saying I'm highly suspicious of anyone who's talking about like UFOs, ghosts, psychic powers, paranormal abilities. I'm highly suspicious of that. But I think that there's a place for the unknown and the mysterious and things that would go beyond our comprehension of consciousness. And I think that could be placed in like a higher category. Like, sure, all right. Like, what if some other planet at some point in time evolved beyond our level of consciousness and somehow, some way, in ways that we don't see or understand, is doing crap that influences us and the information around us in some way? These are points that serious people make. These are serious points. They are not very scientific at all, because there's not a whole lot of like ability for science to prove weird ideas of what might be. Our reality is very, very deeply unknown. That's kind of an important thing to keep in mind as people keep reporting, hey, I got abducted by aliens. It was like in this weird dream, and there were little goblins around my bed, and they like put weird instruments in me, and then I went to like a doctor and they actually removed like a subdermal implant. Like, okay, that's a data point. We can learn about psychology, or we can learn about nature here. There's something to gain from this sort of discussion. And again, you know, this is an integral theory. This is an integral theory of reality. This is a container that contains everything. Thanks for being here, Namal. We'll see you next time. Yeah, I know I should go to bed, but I won't, because I'm bad.
Developmental distinction. And if you're familiar with the Wilbur-Combs matrix, you would know that states are free and stages are earned, and that you can get into a state at any stage of development. The only thing that's different is how you interpret the state. Let's go to Ken Wilber, so that way you can see.
There's another dynamic that he always discusses in this context, which is the idea of state structures. That like, there's a difference between just having a state at any time. And what I believe he actually says is the state itself is free, the state structure is earned, because he calls those stages as well. And he definitely says that in reference to, you know, vertical levels. But yeah, so the state structure is like, not only have I ever had a subtle state, I could do it right now. I am doing it right now. I do it every day. It's part of me. I can teach it to anyone. You know, that's kind of what I would see as like a stable state structure. Some can build their vehicle to navigate land, water, and air, but whether a person can be in a specific territory all the time, this depends on the vehicle.
him say it himself.
States are free, stages are earned. There are several things that meditation doesn't do. It won't provide you with the context of wisdom. And that's why you have to have a cognitive interpretation that goes along with meditative states. You actually have to come out and have a philosophy that helps interpret your experience.
I don't care what stage anybody's at. All 4 states are available at all 6 stages. But as a person unfolds through these stages, they're still going to have access to the states, but they're going to interpret them at the stage they're at.
If you see that interior light, you're going to interpret it according to the stage that you're at. You can't help it. When you're in it, you're in it. But as soon as you come out of it, if you're at the magic stage, it's going to be magical. If you're myth, you're going to interpret it ethnocentric. If you see that light and you're rational and scientist, you might come out of it and you might try to interpret it away. You can have very profound religious experiences, but interpret them ethnocentrically. You can have very profound spiritual experiences, interpret them egocentrically.
You can be at the rational level of development, like Bertrand Russell was, for example, and he had experience of nature mysticism, but he interpreted it, of course, in rational terms. That's almost all you can do. If you have a peak experience, as I was saying, let's say you're at the mythic stage or wave of development, and you have an experience of a subtle being of light. It's culturally molded. If you're in China or in Southeast Asia and you have an experience of light, it might very well have 10,000 arms. It might very well be Avalokiteshvara. You're never going to find a Southern Baptist seeing 10,000 arms. I mean, it's just very, very rare. The ethnocentric part, though, is nobody can be saved unless they believe my God, or unless they believe my Jesus, or my Jehovah, or my Allah, or my whatever it is. It's very, very common at the ethnocentric level.
And just to show you a little bit more, there used to be this course called Core Integral that you could buy, and it was Flash, so it's not really available anymore. But they were teaching the core concepts of integral theory. Let's hear what it has to say about the Wilbur-Combs matrix.
What is
Your
this
vertical
course 1 and 2 bundle? Like, okay.
The ethnocentric level.
And just to show you a little bit more, there used to be this course called Core Integral that you could...
There used to be this course. Like, is this like a knockoff? Like, is this from Integral Institute? Like, what e-learning courses? It's an e-learning course. Is this like if I made a course?
Let's hear what it has to say about the Wilbur-Combs matrix.
Your vertical or structural center of gravity determines your interpretation of every peak experience. This interplay of states and stages is best encapsulated in a diagram such as this, called the Wilbur-Combs lattice. When we take the structural interpretations into consideration, the 4 peak experiences transform into a vast territory of distinctly interpreted peak experiences. Consider someone with a much lower center of gravity, say at red. Do you think that they too could have a non-dual peak experience? The answer is a resounding yes. Their very real peak experience was filtered through an interpretive self-sense that had developed to red. We must admit that their peak experience was authentic.
David, are you opposed to the altitudes concept, like the concept of meta levels that are measured, like basically that there's a verticality that applies to all lines, I guess? I think would be the altitudes concept.
Peak experiences are possible regardless of developmental level. We can value or rank based on this individual's specific interpretation as less developmentally complex. States are the containers, and structures determine content and interpretation.
So again, states are not pre or trans. There are no trans-rational states. There are only trans-rational interpretations of states. And even talking about the states as trans is a pre-rational interpretation of the state.
I guess I've never had what I would consider a state experience that didn't seem transrational to me. And that's probably because, well, I don't know. It seems more transrational, say, I'm assuming that states that I've had were at level 6, probably.
We're not talking about a trans-rational interpretation of states. You're talking about the literal, dogmatic, traditional, pre-rational interpretation of what these states mean, rooted inside of the traditional, religious, Eastern worldview.
It's going through the layer of translation that the ancient descriptions of states, which are pretty popular, pretty common, part of how our culture understands what states are, older stuff, come from those older cultures. Perhaps the individuals themselves had many lines at those older levels while they were describing those states. So, yeah. But you're saying, like we're all saying, everyone's saying, level 3 can have the non-dual experience. So, like if level 7 can have that experience and level 3 can have that, can't level 7 use level 3's data, like level 3's description, to then put themselves into, okay, I understand a lot of this is like level 3 language, but what they're describing is a state that is the same state that I can access at my level. Like, I think this is all integral.
People at a rational stage will talk about how it calms me down, it helps me to be centered, it relieves my stress, all this kind of stuff.
I don't think that people who describe it that way are having like subtle and causal states. I'm open to feedback on that, but I don't. Whenever I've meditated a lot and felt like relaxed and calm and like cool things, good vibes, a little happier, sure. And then I've had states of consciousness that I would like describe like, whoa, I'm having a religious experience. I wouldn't describe that as like, oh, it was peaceful, it was relaxing, I was chill. I don't think that's my level. I think it's like states of consciousness until you're like acclimatized to transcendent states of consciousness. They're pretty intense. I believe that is like part of it in most cases. Like they're pretty shocking and intense. They overturn things. It's not just like peaceful, relaxing. I don't think that those. I think that level 5 is like often very ill-suited to states of consciousness because they have a predilection to not believe in them, and they have a very pragmatic mindset and a very egoic mindset, right? That's like just kind of counter to the general vibe of accessing states of consciousness, I believe. And so can a person at level 5 like access like non-dual, right? Yeah. Causal. Yeah. They can. I mean, obviously, especially if you're motivated by level 5, like, yeah, you're going to try as hard as you can to do that and maybe you'll get it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. We're all saying the same thing here. It is counterintuitive to illustrate states in a horizontal axis. It would be more intuitive to have a levels altitude as well as a state altitude. Yeah, I like to think of states as like depth going down, like deeper, and levels as going up. The point being that like I think that the point where we're all making here is that like they're not the same darn thing. That the states are not the same darn thing as levels. They have a relationship to one another. They happen. All states occur at all levels. No, like we're all kind of on board with that. That was the thing that kind of I think that Ken Wilber like learned throughout his like making this theory. I don't think he started out with that. But I'm just saying in broad numbers, right, across populations, would there not be like differences in frequencies of transcendental state experiences at particular levels? Or do you think it's just like a type thing, or how does that work? Right, yeah. Right. What is the practical reason for accessing Nirvikalpa Samadhi? Greater peace, greater resolve, greater equanimity. Is that a sufficient motive? Because I feel like I'm motivated by mortality and the noble truths, and I think that that's why in that tradition it's described it like in those terms. I think that it really is like a life and death situation from a lot of people's perspective, particularly from the perspective, in my opinion, of most people who are driven to go like all the way into that and adopt all of the states as like legitimate state structures to really make it like who they are and what they are.
But that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about literal interpretations rooted inside of literal beliefs in the Eastern worldview. Like you're really getting in touch with the ground of being, and that consciousness is the ground of being, and that you found your true self, all this kind of stuff.
That's a literal koan. That's not a symbolic thing. There's something in you right now that existed prior to your parents' birth, and it's that sense of I amness. The journey of enlightenment, if you want to put it in a simplified form, is the journey that moves you from your empirical self, anything that you can see or know about yourself, any object, to pure awareness, pure self, your true self, the self that cannot be made an object, but is the space in which all of this is arising. That's a literal koan. That's not a symbolic thing.
A literal koan, though, so this is a very dialectic thing. It's stupid. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like the way he's saying it is like suspicious, highly suspicious. But when you say it's a literal koan, that has a like koan has a meaning that it's like the literality of it is not concrete. Like to be literally a koan is not the same thing as the koan to be literally true. You keep talking like only your interpretations of what states are legitimate before you even demonstrated that they're legitimate. The claim is that before I've even demonstrated that they're legitimate, the claim is that they are pre-rational. I mean, like, this is actually, my problem is that I don't know how different people talk about states, like what I should consider real or not, because I feel like there are different ways of describing the experience of having states, and I don't personally find it easy to tell the difference in another person. It's a probabilities thing. It's like a probably kind of deal. I feel like I talk as though my state interpretations are highly suspicious. I hope that that gets across to everybody. I'm just trying to tell people what it's like in my language, in my words, or try to say things that might cause other people to experience the experiences that I have experienced or am experiencing in whatever, in whatever context we're talking about in that case. I think that the way that I experience states is probably not for everyone. It's probably weird just because I'm somewhat of I myself am strange and unusual in many ways. So I don't generally try to like package my form of spirituality for other people. But what does it mean for a koan to be literally true? That's gonna drive somebody crazy thinking about that. I mean, I'm in a bastardized Zen always, but it's telling you this like riddle that you're supposed to think about, and it's like impossible to solve. It's literally that. Ooh, you just made it worse. It's literally that. It's literally that. Yeah, so he's being a bastard. Ken Wilber's being a jerk here.
His greatest mythology, or interpretive mythology, and somebody I certainly cut my teeth on it. I was a great admirer of his and a really extraordinary work that he did. He used to say that there's really sort of two types of mythology, or mythology forms two different functions. He wouldn't use the terms pre-rational and trans-rational, but the way we're talking about them is the way he would talk about these two functions of mythology. And the first function is when mythology is taken to be concretely real. But what some people do, particularly educated, intelligent people like us that are trying to get some meaning in our lives, we can tend to take myths as deeply symbolic of something else. So that's a very distinguishing way to tell the difference between pre-rational myths that are taken to be concretely, literally true, and trans-rational myths as deeply symbolic.
That's a literal koan. That's not a symbolic thing. There's something in you right now that existed prior to your parents' birth, and it's that sense of I amness.
And the problem again with the pre-trans fallacy, way too many people take a lot of the pre-rational stuff and elevate it to trans-rational glory it just doesn't have.
Fundamentalist, religious believer, they don't take these things metaphorically. These are not symbols of some higher truth. These are the truth. That's a literal koan. That's not a symbolic thing.
From a really trans-rational perspective, there's no such thing as a true self. Self is a concept. Self is a narrative. Self is a myth. And these claims that you're...
My question for like Chad is like, are pointing out instructions true? Are they sometimes true? Are they always true? Must they be true? And pointing out instructions to be literal. Well, literal's a dumb word to use, right? Because they're clearly not literal, right? And I mean, that's the point you're making. That's really easy for me to parse out. Like, right? Like the first time I watch, not in this context, but if any time I'd watch that, I'd be like, well, literal's a silly word to use there. And I don't think that's like the whole thesis of his model. I think that that's just like a time where there's this weird thing with pointing out instructions that they really have to kind of be taken seriously by the psyche itself. Like, but you have to actually like check it out. Like try it on. I feel like that's kind of how it works for me anyways. I kind of fool myself into a state of consciousness by saying I'm already in it, and then it starts happening and it's like, oh wow, yeah, I am in it. Whoa, good job. If a human being says to another human being something and that causes them, not solely, but it results in experiencing a transcendental state of consciousness, you can't say to some person watching, the thing I just said is true. That is wrong to somebody else watching. Yeah, like I agree with that. If it's your koan though, it's true, and it's you. In order for it to be effective, I think that you have to have a placebo effect. That's kind of how sorcery works in a lot of cases, is like trying on a different framework. I amness before the Big Bang is literally true and is your true self. That's Ken Wilber's claim. I amness before the Big Bang is literally true. I amness before the Big Bang is literally true. That's a koan right there. Before your parents were born, I am. He that is part of the work. That is in his books. That's the thing he says. That's part of the message.
Level of interpretation. They're not even compatible with our understanding of how reality actually works, rooted in a rational perspective. They can't be trans-rational.
rooted in a rational perspective, rooted in an integral perspective, or I guess flowering in an integral perspective.
If they don't even rise to the level of the rational. Transrational transcends and includes the rational. So it would be a perspective that is in accord with our rational understandings about how reality works and
in accord with them, it could be disruptive of them. I mean, this is the point, that our rational understandings of reality, we don't know how rational our understanding of reality is. This is sort of level 6. I mean, this is kind of how I understand transrational in general, in the way that you're putting it, as not related to states, but as a level of development. Like, it's being able to look critically at my own rational apparatus. And I think that from this perspective, anything that anyone thinks is suspicious, right?
Doing more, deconstructing the relative ways in which we talk about and understand.
I think the science of objectivity finds proof in objective quadrants, but ontological science, the ground of being, necessitates an upper left proof. Wilber says one must do the experiment. So that's another thing that's a good phrasing of it. It's a thing that Ken Wilber says, Integral says, is like, the upper left state experience is like a scientific experiment, and the rules will seem strange to you for how you do the experiment. They will seem strange to you, I should assume, strange to me, until it starts making sense along the path. Kind of. That seems to be how it's gone in lower level cultures that have brought this into a mainstream place in their cultures. Yeah, and science in quotes, that's a upper left science, but upper right is like the science land.
Understand the world and ourselves because of the relative nature of language, because of the fact that we're always doing storytelling. This is the postmodern or transrational deconstruction of the rational. That's why it's saying everything is relative, because the whole point is that all we have is relative language to be able to talk about things. All we have is storytelling. All we have is myth. So beyond just the literal rational interpretation where we take stories literally and ask, is it literally true? Is it literally false? We would also include metaphor and ask, do the metaphors also cash out in accord with reality? That's why it's rational plus, not pre-rational myths taken literally, but myths understood metaphorically. Even scientific myths understood as myths. Evolution is a story about how things happen. We're doing storytelling. It's just that all the symbols that we use, all the names that we have for everything are really well qualified, and they line up with facts. From a transrational perspective, stories aren't just fiction. You have to understand what's true about it or what's fiction about it. You have to understand what the story is actually saying, and does it cash out in accord with reality? So if we're making a claim that Jesus died on the cross, are we making a claim about a historical figure that needs to be evaluated with his...
Nobody's going to argue about this definition of rationality. I mean, this is like a really good explanation of it. The suggestion, of course, remains that what occurs in a transcendent state of consciousness can be called transrational. So we're getting into semantics here and, nomenclature of a meta theory. Like, should we not call that transrational in spite of it kind of having a feeling of being transrational from the perspective of the language and the experience?
You see what I'm saying? It's about interpretation and how those interpretations cash out in accord with reality. What is the type of claim that we're actually making? And then are we using the appropriate methodology to evaluate that claim?
David says, looking at one's upper left can only show you your upper left, not the truth of ultimate reality. Is your upper left the truth of ultimate reality? It would have to be like all 4 quadrants to be the truth of ultimate reality, right? Yeah. So, I need to I can't really address this without understanding how your really just your idea of anything to do with states that is different from Ken Wilber and new.
Transrational level. Would it be if they were able to say, I'm going to act as if?
Yeah, well, first of all, you ask them exactly what is it that you're doing. If they're making an empirical claim, check it empirically. If they're making an empirical claim, check it empirically. If they're making an empirical claim, check it empirically. On the other hand, it can be very high kind of...
So how do you, we've done this. We've done this thing, this moment? Like, how do you empirically check whether there is a ground of being? These are like
metaphoric and as-if interpretive tool.
Rational people tend to only have one type of methodology to be able to evaluate a claim. Is it literally true or literally false? Transrational people can do more. They can say, well, it's literally false, but metaphorically, if by this we mean this, as if this means this, then it could be true. And that's a reasonable claim, a rational claim to make. It transcends and includes the literal.
Like, and me as like a placebo purist, if believing this thing makes it true, is it then true?
Rational. You see?
Transrational has to do with a redefinition of the self-sense, the moral position that you inhabit, the meaning of your life, the way you perceive and understand the nature of reality.
No, transrational
is more all of those. If you go beyond rational to transrational, does that not change the nature of how you understand your life and your identity and what you are and the nature of reality? Like, I think that each of the levels represents a change in all of those things. Those are different lines, of course, but yeah, they show up at levels.
Transpersonal is about deconstructing our concept of self and understanding ourself differently in relation to reality, but not in the way that you're thinking of it. You're more thinking of it in terms of the traditional worldview.
I don't think that this part's true. I think how I'm thinking of it is in a very like generalizing, clumpy, aggregating way. And the word rational to me is generally referring to level 5 across the board, not a particular line. That's a problem with vocabulary.
So the way that you're cashing that out is not actually transrational, it's pre-rational. You're still working in the context of traditional mythological interpretations of what's happening with these states. It's exactly in line with traditional fundamentalist dogmatic Buddhism.
So I guess the pot of gold is like, you have content somewhere that gets me to a causal state of consciousness using like reason, logic, science, literal. I don't have access to anything like that. And I don't do it the way that a lot of other people do it. So I'm curious about all three of these. I think that's the pot of gold in any case, is like, okay, here, there's no vocabulary from other places. There's no drawing from any other source. This is how you become enlightened, and this is what the word enlightened means. That to me is kind of what Integral has moved toward. I see that this is like the first thing that kind of starts to do that.
It can represent a deeper self, a higher self. It can represent oneness with all of reality.
So trans being not metaphorical, but a deeper self, a higher self. So not poetic metaphorical, which is pre-rational mythology.
Mythology isn't pre-rational. As he says in this exact video, people who are literal believers don't think about mythology as mythology. They think about it as literally true, as actual.
You can read mythology at any level. You can comprehend mythology at any level. The mythology that is most, like the strongest mythology that we still use today is going to be the stuff that functions best as mythology. And so we continue to look at it in cases that we describe a lot here. We look at the mythology from higher levels, for sure. I don't think that's very controversial. I have a video about enlightenment through different stages linked in the description. Cool. Yeah, cool. That might be a good next step for me.
Real.
Fundamentalist religious believer, they don't take these things metaphorically. These are not symbols of some higher truth. These are the truth. So that's a very distinguishing way to tell the difference between pre-rational myths that are taken to be concretely, literally true, and trans-rational myths as deeply symbolic.
People who are fundamentalist religious believers believe the myth literally, which is what you're doing, which is what Wilbur is doing.
That's a literal coin. That's not a symbolic thing. There's something in you right now that existed prior to your parents' birth, and it's that sense of I amness.
And I think, based on what I'm showing you, should be undeniable. Rational people deconstruct and
okay. Just responding to this right now. Thank you, people who tuned in. I'm still doing these by surprise. I'm not going to schedule them for a minute. I've got a lot of things going on, and really awesome that people showed up today. We had a lively chat. David, this guy in the video, he's here talking to me. That's in the chat. But yeah, so I'm responding both to his video and to him hanging out in the chat here in real time. So very fun, awesome video. Thanks everybody for being here. All of my state work so far has taken place through a lower level lens than the lens that I typically am, than my general center of gravity, center of altitude. The only way that I know to access states seems to, at this point in the discussion, seems to be coming from exclusively pre-level 5. And I'm saying I definitely see the case for none of my spirituality really comes much from level 5. I think level 5 is my secular zone very heavily, and I do feel a hallowed sense of, I love spiders. I like nature's cute, nature's beautiful. I love it. It's the spiritual jam, creating nature, creating the experience of being people. This is all a very spiritual thing, but I don't like that's not really where I would go to have a state experience in this moment. So yeah, I'm probably really weak on again, to me, it feels like level 5 is generally pretty weak on state technologies and practices that genuinely take you to those higher states. I do think that there's differences across the altitudes in terms of how much they have seemed historically to prioritize state practice or to make it a part of life for some class of people, a part of life that is available to people, a part of life that is cherished and celebrated and elevated up as a good thing, as a value in that society. I think those are like pretty across the board, but you could draw some generalizations and inferences there. In my opinion, I do states through a level 6, level 7 kind of lens, I would say. In general, that's kind of how I've done states, it would seem, and that seemed to be where my center of gravity was at the time. I'm of the mind that ancient mythologies, ancient texts, things that came from a period where the center of gravity of civilization itself was much lower, perhaps level 4, level 3, that those have actually been gateways for me to understanding these things much better than through my own culture, through my own levels literature, except for Ken Wilber, which I consider level 7, level 8 literature that has helped me to access states greatly. Perhaps one of the most helpful things in terms of reading people, in terms of ideology and becoming steeped in different technologies and different ways of comprehending what this perennial philosophy is. Give us a woo, and I guess we're all going to bed. Integral theory reorganized the way that I understood, like the things that I already understood and were starting to make sense to me, made a lot of sense, but it was also pointing me at like stuff that I was not aware of. And like that took me a long time to make sense of and understand why it was important and to internalize and to really like have a fully integral perspective. I think takes a really long time from that entry point.
I do the meditation in the context of thinking about it in terms of idealism. And then when I achieve the state, that proves idealism. No, it doesn't. But this is self-mastery, becoming practice. And no, it's not just for first tier. When you actually consciously become particular archetypes as is appropriate to whatever your given situation is, that's part of healthy second tier self-mastery. And that's the kind of thing that you can only really start to do when you have deconstructed the narrative around self, the concept of self, and you realize that self is something that you self-author, something that you consciously become and create. This self-becoming and self-creation is something that is done on the other side of an existential deconstruction of self, and it is part of what it means to be transpersonal. Again, we don't think of the expression of second tier transpersonal in the same way that Buddhists do either.
All present, ground of all being.
At the highest level, the clear light level, Jesus is a metaphor for consciousness as the ground of being. So here you have it, the conflation that I'm talking about. Jesus is Buddhism. This is the highest interpretation. Jesus is Buddhism.
So, okay. So since you did this to me, I'm going to do this to you. Can you see why it feels to me like you're not understanding that you can't literally say that the video said that? And that because of that, that's not a sin. I don't mind that. That's fine. It's a chess move. It's a tactic. But when you do that, it makes me feel like you're yelling it into, like you have an emotional reason why you're doing a tactic instead of like more fairly just presenting the information to someone.
causal and non-dual. This is a literal, traditional, dogmatic Buddhist narrative. Non-reductionism doesn't talk about states in terms of these gross, subtle, causal, non-dual kind of terminology.
Sure. Okay. I thought you did. I thought trained states did. Okay. Yeah. No, that was still an open question. I still don't know how you represent them. I thought that you considered trained states to be like just an upper left thing, and you said that you like the WC matrix, as you call it, I believe, showing the levels with the states as being horizontal, perpendicular. You like that, but it's not in your thing. I didn't realize that. I figured that since you liked it, it was in your thing. So okay, then we just don't really know, and that's why I start to make assumptions about what you think about states.
He is also a lecturer in religious studies at California State University in Long Beach. He got his doctorate in sociology from the University of California, San Diego, and he has a master's in the history of phenomenology of religion from the Graduate Theology Union in Berkeley. He's the author.
I'm not going to say this a ton on my channel, but I haven't said it much. It is quite possible to have like 5 PhDs and be like totally nuts. I don't know how people do this, but it happens from time to time. So, but no, maybe not that intensely, but like often credentials, like you can throw all these credentials at me and then a person comes up and they're an idiot. That's happened to me a lot. So it's like, okay.
Is a serious source. And his book here is called Frisky Dirt, Why Ken Wilber's New Creationism is Pseudoscience. Came out in 2011. Lane argues that Wilber's Eros in the Cosmos idea, the claim that evolution is driven by a spiritual force pushing towards higher consciousness, is essentially a new form of creationism disguised as evolutionary theory.
It is one way to tell the story of time zero. It's one way to tell the story of creation, what happened from the beginning of time to the end of time, what's going on right now, what happens over and over again, right? To describe it all as a development towards greater inclusion, complexity, consciousness, et cetera, we're just calling that eros. It is a mythologizing in the sense of putting it into a word, but it's referring to something that has no word for it. It's sort of a concept that's meta to our concerns. It's a meta concept generally to our concerns. If you're suggesting that someday we'll just like find that, there's an actually like specific thing, or that you're saying we know that now through like systems theories and things like that we already understand through biological evolution theory, we already understand, for whatever reason, we already understand that there is a specific mechanism that generates this character to the universe where no matter what you throw at it, it will generate new levels of complexity and diversity, and they will be more awake and alive and alert and aware and movable, and it is as though every stage is a slightly more awake version of manifestation. It's like a strange observation that is really, really central and pertinent to what I'm experiencing here.
Lane says Wilber switches back and forth between saying that eros is metaphorical and eros is literal, which avoids accountability in either domain. The main argument in a nutshell is that any claim that evolution requires intentional guidance is by definition creationism, even if you rename that creator eros or spirit. You can criticize if something is a good test before the test, and you can also criticize the results after you perform the injunction. And Wilber's deep science fails in both ways. Dr. Lane's critique is that Wilber's theology contradicts science.
Evolution science, as I understand, doesn't care why parameciums became humans. That's not really, it's like, well, it happened randomly. Okay, perfect. There you go. But it's like, why didn't it just stay parameciums forever? Well, because complexity, because this and that and this and that. And it just keeps happening over and over again. It's just an observation about the nature of reality. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm biased, but you really get the sense this guy, he wrote a whole book calling integral theory religion. Okay. That's what your book's about. Why don't, I like what David's doing. In his book, does he move forward, or is this an entire book about Wilber?
I mean, well known in the Wilbur community.
Who in the world
past, I
read
was a
that
huge
book?
fan. I think I did my share of Wilbur promotion. I wrote a book, I created a website, I created the Wilbur meetups. And over the past 6 or 7 years, I've distanced myself more and more from what I...
And to be fair, I do believe I've read Something Super Long by this guy. All right, so I do believe I've read Something Super Long by this guy.
See, it's a kind of digital circus. Very good at promoting a view, even a lifestyle, using the sales language and the political slogans that go with that. In the beginning, for 2 decades, I was really a Wilberian, if ever there was one, until I started investigating the fields he touches, especially the scientific ones. I see it now as a community who celebrates a certain body of ideas, but not in a very critical way. In my view, the culture around Wilbur and integral is not a more sober and skeptical attitude that says, with every claim and statement made by Wilbur, hey, is that really true? What do the experts say in a certain field? Can he get away with anything he says and writes? Is that enough authority to believe his ideas? I don't think so. Wilbur
Can he get away with anything?
Because I value his program and I like his ideas, there is every reason to follow that closely and to just not be impressed by any authority, argument, or games he plays. Like, we had a real exchange on the internet.
Nobody's asking you to be impressed with Wilbur. He's just, since you are, he's using that capital. I can agree with a lot of this. And I think they're good criticisms a lot of the time. They don't like bring me over the line where I would say I don't like Ken Wilber, but yeah, these are compelling arguments. Heard them before. I hear them again and again and again. They're compelling arguments. Mostly like he should do this instead of what he's doing. It would be better if he was this way. His work is incomplete. And these are all things he says about himself, too. I mean, it's just an observation about reality, again. On both sides of the argument, we're just observations of reality.
I think that created far more problems than it solved, and it basically was like crack for Asperger's kids. Getting a contact high from reading Ken's stuff and getting to see yourself on a map and position yourself up and away from, no matter what the disclaimers were, and there were plenty of disclaimers, the reality as that showed up in culture and in practice resulted in a bunch of dissociated eggheads masquerading as Jedi, and that, I think, was, part of the cracks in the foundation. Second-tier men who
but I don't think it's that common. I think that there's a lot of people who are looking for that thing, whether they're stalkers or they have some deep need to be something, they're looking for their identity or their thing. I don't feel like they're that attracted to Ken Wilber in particular. I know that can definitely happen. But I feel like there's so many other better ways to go with that energy that don't require as much work. But yeah, no, this is this is a thing, guys. This is
balanced in their embodiment. Spiral dynamics sort of firmly jumped the shark when Ken changed the colors to align with the chakras. That would be the place I would back it off from. It lost.
Why? What do you mean? Why? He lost you when he changed the colors to align with, but you know that the colors didn't matter, that they don't matter, right?
All of its nuance and most of its usefulness by the time it got simplified into the versions that most people are conversant with today. There's been lots of solid and methodical breakdowns of where integral theory got out over its skis, specifically its orienting generalizations and presuming to define entire academic...
Somatics is always going to be, I don't know if I'm not allowed to call it transrational, but somatics doesn't want to do what you want to think makes the most sense. And that's why we get so caught up in somatic illness, is because the thing that seems like the thing you ought to do, it might be unhealthy, right? I noticed this really as a singing teacher, like the way that you tell people to do something somatically, it makes no literal sense, but they'll get it, breathe all the way down to your toes. You get it. Why did that work? You obviously didn't do that. You know how lungs are. Somatics are weird, but yeah, chakras make a ton of sense, and the spectrum behaves like a spectrum, so cool, interesting analogy.
For him to be discussing glibly chakra systems or subtle energy or things that are very far off the reservation of even skeptical enthusiasts and discussing them as if they are established facts.
And I mean, let's face it, like a big part of the hook of Wilbur was the New Age movement and disillusionment with the New Age.
I think spirituality is wildly overrated, and I think our core humanity is wildly underrated. And so the teachers that I can get behind, folks who are like, this is it, this is us. And
this point is insane from a non-dual perspective, right?
Folks who are like, this is it, this is us, and get used to it. And the way out is through. The way out is down and in, not up and away.
Well, down and in, not up and away. That's just a prejudice, man. What? I think that's just a rational, pragmatic perspective on life. I don't think it has anything to do with spirituality. So I think it's weird to call that spiritual.
The way out is down and in, not up and away. Those experiences.
And when you say down and up, you have to explain what those directions mean because they're metaphorical mythology.
Feel more honest, and we don't end up in the schizoid effort to reconcile the utter tragedy that is the human experience with all of these ascendant so-called spiritual states or experiences. The feedback loops I haven't seen Ken being open to it, and I think there's legitimate peevishness on his part, clearly got increasingly hijacked and reactive. At some point, you take a swipe at the ankle biters. The critiques of Ken that are just inflammatory, reactionary, don't get it, caricature, typecast, yeah.
I mean, in terms of like public figures or thinkers, philosophers responding, pop philosophers responding to critics, let's say, or new age philosophers responding to critics. I guess from these guys' perspective, it was surprising how persnickety he can get, but I don't think there's any way to call it like extremely irritable or like he's mean to his critics or anything. It's dismissive is the kind of the term.
In and through the New Age community, and it still carried that DNA. People were attracted to Integral often because Integral was a ticket to make their spiritual journeys and intuitions more legit in a modern, rational, secular society. Many of the Integralist followers were in it specifically for that ingredient. People are there to fulfill this particular need. When you then go, okay, let's look at the system side, they nod, but after a while they get bored with it. And they say, okay, sure, but when do we do the real stuff? The meditation. Meditation is the legit part, but from there on, they want to go farther. And before long, you're sitting there arguing with people about certain forms of magical thinking. There's this sense that we all have, people who are spiritually inclined, that transformation is possible. Wow, but you're this integral person, right? You work through your shadows and you can take all of these multiple perspectives. But after years and years working with people, it's like, wait a minute, you guys are all the same as the kind of people I grew up with and I'm used to. It's the same old humanity. I guess just my expectations have gone up too much. Metamodernism is, of course, a commentary on a certain cultural vibe and certain stage, etc. And I think the next torchbearer for that kind of thing would be, I don't think there are almost any self-identified integralists anymore. That kind of movement that was fairly monolithically...
Let's see, am I a self-identified integralist? No. I think no. Am I a self-identified integralist?
Following Wilbur that existed 15 years ago or 10 years ago almost doesn't exist anymore. It has failed. If the project is this particular brand to kind of find its way into the center of human thinking and there begin to integrate all strands of human thoughts and knowledge in a productive, actionable manner, then it did fail. Integral was kind of a point where everything kind of came together in one person, in one setting, etc., and then kind of explodes in many, many, many different directions, some of which go really south. So,
see, and Daniel Gortz, I feel like this is where you failed. You were those people that came together to be the integral level, right? We're like scapegoating the guy who wrote the books about it. But this is a thing I circle around a lot here with critics of Ken Wilber and Integral. Like, try and do it and come back and say what happens. I feel like Ken Wilber kind of did that. He tried to do it and came back and said what happened. Like, that's kind of what I'm asking Level 7 to do, and do better than Ken Wilber, darn it.
Far-right stuff, lonely people being in telepathic communication with Wilbur via YouTube, UFOs, integral Nazis, psychedelic Nazis, what the
Why you so cold? Why, baby, why you so cold? You ain't gotta be so
etc., etc., etc. We may need to, at this point, not be too inclusive. We need to, I think, move towards stronger discernment in terms of future developments of meta theory. There are significant updates possible to Wilber's theories. The new kind of prism that needs to emerge is a more thorough and more careful meta theory. I think there's some kind of cosmic battle to be had for the soul of Integral. The marriage of sense and soul, right? They're not married.
Yeah, but that's mythology. It's not what's really going on. So, like, we can talk like this. Yeah, fine. A battle for the soul of integral theory. What's the problem?
And people are fooling themselves. Like, they talk to respective integralists, and they will say, "So my next big project is I'm going to research the number of the dates you're born and how that influences your life." There's no research to the frontier and really where we can
always
see
a fascinating
working,
subject,
etc. And it's like, it's not real. It's just not real. proportioning yourself.
I seriously doubt it's real.
People in the integral community, pure theory or meta theory models. That I think is the real future of the real integral, the real marriage of sense and soul.
So the kinds of branding and marketing that have been associated with Ken Wilber's kind of integrative pluralism has been a little bit too positive, futuristic, American, feel good, clean. And that sets up a dichotomy so that when there are normal human problems, they start to get into this culture where you can't help but become fragile and crash when you've got that kind of distortion. When I came into the community, I thought, oh, this is an example of something.
Distortion. You just said that, and that's the word to explain. That's the word that was weird and colorful, right? To explain that word, right? Distortion, because you just described the perspective, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, we don't look down on children. We love children. They're our favorite. Your children are your favorite. We it's the higher levels you got to look out for. But being at a higher level is an accomplishment. Sometimes a lot of it was kind of other people moving you, and sometimes you really did it on your own. So congratulations for any of that stuff. Maybe the non-dual realization happened to you spontaneously, and in that case, shame on you. And if you had to work really hard to arrive at that, or you're still working and you never arrived at that, then, congratulations. I applaud your efforts. Trophy of participation, I believe in that. I think you deserve it. And you're worth it.
That Wilber's temperament brought to all of this. And one of the things he does is he likes to be casually dismissive. He likes to push off against things. This is integralism, and that was the postmodern cul-de-sac, right? And you kind of exaggerate the degree of difference. We don't have to worry about that one because we've got this one now. We'll naturally start to do that to him as well. You go, well, that was the problematic integralism. This is integral 2.0 or something like that. Not to pick on David Long, because I think as off-putting to some people as David Long might be, that attempt to draw a really clear distinction about being at least rational, at least modern in the way we think about this is very important. All the meta-theorists are doing is saying, here are the things you shouldn't leave out. Critical thinking is one of them. And then when you have
the entire green meme gets that treatment in integral, right? I mean, it's an anti-green meme and anti-first tier sentiment that would be typical, to at least to the extent of being trans to them, right?
General question of exclusion and inclusion and how you set that membrane up and how you establish community spaces that are as inclusive as possible. But
this is the key question, exclusion. Yes.
Don't include the things that endanger people and undermine the space, and how you allow the space to take hits and be anti-fragile by growing in response to not trying to control everything, but at the same time, establish real boundaries in order to establish a particular ethos in a particular space.
Yeah.
These are really open-ended questions that Integral has suffered through, and we're all going to keep suffering through as we try to refine the skill of how to do that. And I think also there's been a tendency to not understand and not make clear the difference between, say, integration and blurring. There need to be very careful membranes around that so that we don't think experimental blending and integrating gives you freedom to just blur the differences between all these zones. Well, we need to police that a little bit better.
Fusion and differentiation, I think we all get that.
Have a theory that empowers us to do that.
Ken Wilber evangelist for many years, probably for at least a decade. There just started to be some places where I felt like this is not adding up as much for me anymore. That eventually leads me into the place where I'm having conversations with people like David. I think there's really just some key points where we feel like the integral model and integral community took some wrong turns and headed off in a direction that doesn't make sense to me anymore, even though it may have at some point. As I intersected with the integral community more over the years, part of where integral runs into trouble for me is that there can be a tendency to overprivilege upper left experiences. If someone were to come along and say, no, I had this experience, and this experience is proof of this interpretation. How do we navigate that bridge between profound experience and what we assert that experience means with much more care and rigor, while understanding that the desire to do that is not based in devaluing the experience. It's based in taking the experience seriously and saying we need to have.
It's so interesting how consistent these points are that I can kind of respond the same way to all of them. It's
that certain lines in the sand are what they are. For example, there is no replicated, peer-reviewed evidence for any kind of paranormal phenomena. That is just a given, and the interesting conversation starts on the other.
There is no yeah, that's what makes it paranormal currently. If there becomes evidence for it, it stops being paranormal, right? Like UAPs are no longer paranormal. We have footage of them, but we still have no idea what they are.
Other side of that, that's not interesting to me. And yet, my struggle with feeling like I'm part of the integral community is a lot of people who are deeply involved in integral do find debating that stuff interesting and do find asserting that stuff interesting and worthwhile. And that may just be a difference in temperament. I don't find that as compelling as you do. And
that's
I have
my
these
opinion.
Suspicions and biases about what it might
My
mean.
opinion is that is a matter of temperament. Hell, maybe you're a ghost hunter for a living, an integral informed ghost hunter. right? How do you fit your profession into this? That'd be cool. New Age spirituality for
All right,
smart
final
people. I like
thoughts.
that. Well, geez.
Big thanks to everybody who
Sounds
made
fine.
it this far in the video. If you made it this far in the video,
I
type a
did.
comment down below and start it with the words, "Thanks for the deep dive," so I know you watched all the way.
I
Big
might.
thanks to Adam from
Well, he knows
unThinkMe.
I watched
This
it all the way.
video is really trying to get to the heart of our differences.
Great job.
Because I do think that's important.
Yeah.
Adam has said in his past videos that he feels a kind of kinship with me. We have a lot in common.
Yeah.
And I think he's right. I also was a huge fan and supporter of integral theory
I'm not a
for
fan.
a long time.
I don't
And
like
I hope
fans.
he and other people who are coming from an integral perspective watch this video, understand that my perspective is good faith, and it is coming from a person who spent a long time in this community, a long time, thinking very in depth about integral ideas. I know a lot of people got into this community specifically because of the spiritual ideas related to it. And I think maybe Adam might be one of these people too. When I scroll through his video, he even mentioned something at some point where he seemed surprised that I don't believe in free will.
Yeah.
And he was like, we can make choices. The free part of free will means free from influence, like not determined by, determinism. And determinism is different than fatalism.
Oh boy, this conversation is not as simple as you're making it out.
So if you believe in nature and nurture, then your will isn't free. It doesn't mean that you can't make choices, but those choices are not coming from
Sure, I get all this. I've heard the Sam Harris, I've heard you, I've heard all this, I've heard this. I still make choices, and I think that's important to philosophy.
These arguments about free will versus determinism are kind of freshman philosophies.
And they totally are, yeah. The thing to get from this, though, is that both of those perspectives are morally important. Both of them are morally important to the decisions that you make every second. Because if you don't believe that the universe is calculated, you're going to be an idiot, right? A narcissist. You're going to think that whatever you think is true and whatever you want is how things are going to go. And if you think the other way around, that the only determinism, which one did I do first? Only determinism is true and free will doesn't exist. The universe is totally calculated. It doesn't matter what I do, so I'll be a lazy bum. I'll cheat people. Narcissism, right? It's like, if you only have a reductionist view of one quadrant or the other, and you're calling that linguistically, semantically, the nature of reality, it tends toward narcissism to not see both at once and the importance of both, just morally. And we all get this. But that's, to be honest, that's because the free will versus determinism debate has taken on so many shapes and it's had so many faces. That's what I'm saying is the general character of the debate. Which this doesn't resolve. It's just some weird thing happened in time where now we're having this debate again with a slightly different kind of framing of it.
At the end of Adam's last video, I think he spent like maybe 20 minutes almost doing like a kind of spiritual pointing out instructions kind of a thing.
Yeah, just right here, right now. With the guitar. I am. What am
he really thinks that this Buddhist interpretation of awakening is the really good and important thing here. Even the name unThinkMe makes me worry.
The name unThinkMe makes me worry.
No, it's not just for first tier. When you actually consciously become particular archetypes as is appropriate to whatever your given situation is, that's part of healthy second tier self-mastery. And that's the kind of thing that you can only really start to do when you have deconstructed the narrative around self, the concept of self, and you realize that self is something that you self-author, something that you consciously become and create. This self-becoming and self-creation is something that is done on the other side of an existential deconstruction of self, and it is part of what it means to be transpersonal. From a really transrational perspective, there's no such thing as a true self. Self is a concept. Self is a narrative. Self is a myth.
Self is a myth.
But I have seen some really good signs from Adam. He seems very good faith. I'm also posting this on my I Am David Long channel, where a lot of my old videos are living, and I'm not posting it on the Non-Reductionist channel because I want to save the Non-Reductionist channel.
I get that now. I understand that now. Yeah, this is annoying. This is like, you didn't set out to make videos to provoke this response. You don't want this response. It's just a natural thing that's going to happen. This is like something I've realized. I thought originally the point was to like provoke people like me and to get into like debating about integral theory, which I thought was cool. I was like, yeah. But I mean, it sounds like you genuinely just like are kind of over these people, me and people like me for the most part. And like, I'm just kind of a weird, unlikely ally as you've moved on from this thing. Sure.
But I know a lot of people are going to be coming from the integral community. Yeah. And as it relates to some of these topics, I'd like to be able to just point to this video and be like, that's what I have to say about it.
Dope.
So as it relates to non-reductionism,
oh my God,
I'm currently working on building on-ramps and off-ramps. On-ramps for people who want to learn and off-ramps for people who
to me,
don't
baby.
resonate with the ideas. So if you don't like this video, non-reductionism is probably not for you. If you vibe with this video and you want to learn more about non-reductionism, dig in deeper and check out our links, join the community, get involved. But I'm going to leave it there. Thanks to everybody for watching. Big thanks.
Okay, cool. Yeah, cool. It's super late. Thanks for being here. I'm working on just.
You're ready to remember every detail of your life, like your mind was 20 again. Don't believe me? Give me 60 seconds.
Hang on.
The worst part is you've been lied to by white coat charlatans.
Oh, it's true. We've been the whites. Anyways, I'm not going to do this every time with the live stream. This has been an exercise in getting my live stream working and being really excited to have this conversation with David. It looks like I've been here almost 4 hours, and this is a test to see if my software crashed. It probably did. I don't know. It doesn't look like it did. So hopefully I'm still here and I can make this into the final product. I got this as a present for myself. Isn't that cute? I got a present for myself, and it's like, thank you. How about this? Go get yourself a present. You know, you've been getting all the presents for everyone else.
Is this something in your business?